Hey, hello, VC. This is another Saturday night at La Cruz headquarters. It's September 10th, 2016. It's a real nice night. Summer is kind of coming to a close, but in Texas it usually hangs on a bit. But it's a nice night. And so, with that being said, it's a perfect time to do a video. Let's get right to it. I've got a bunch of albums I want to show you. I brought this one out this week. It's an album called, it's an album by a band called Cydonia. And it's called In Fear of a Red Planet. And, it's cool to have in the collection. In many ways, it's kind of a dance album. I don't remember a whole lot of singing, maybe some samples in that effect, but it's more of like one of those big beat dance floor when you're, lots of bass. Let's say you're in a club and that bass is just chugging away 100 miles an hour, boom, 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 boom. It's one of those type. But, if you get the feeling, if you're in the mood, pardon me. If you're in the mood for something like that, it's a pretty good album. There's not a whole lot of variety. It, to me, is a hit and miss. It's a double album. I think there's 2 songs on each side, which makes it, 8 songs. It gets to sounding the same after a while. I do not know the history of this band, but, you might want to check them out. It's not horrible. Just if you get in the mood for that kind of dance flavor, that might be the band for you. Now this album right here is one of the better albums I bought this year. It's a reissue, and it's a Zoil album, and very interesting. There's so many conversations and debates on really how to pronounce that, whether it's Zoil, but from what I can understand, it's Zoil. And this band was around in the late 70s, early 80s. They recorded this in 1979, and they're called Eschaton, and the album's called Four Visions. And apparently it's if Magma scares you away, pick this one up and try to get into Zoil that way. And I've listened to some Magma albums. I don't have any. They haven't caught me yet. It just hasn't registered. But I listened to this on YouTube and I was blown away. I love this album. It's so creative. It's psychedelic. You call it Zoil. I call it spacey in a way, almost like a type of space rock. You could put it in that category along with other categories. It comes with a download card, which is kind of cool because it's not the download card for the album. It's a compilation for other album. Well, for a compilation album. And so see that there. That's the name of the label. And Zoil, I think. And comes with 15 songs from I'm guessing bands on their label. And I play that in the car constantly. It is that good. It's just all over the place. Psychedelic, spacey. It takes you to another world. So you kind of get 2 albums in one. And I really recommend this. And there's also like another little cool feature. They to me, like Zoil has its own language. I guess it was created by a guy in Magma. And but they sing in French here. So I guess they kind of decided, I don't know why they decided not to sing in the Zoil language, but they sing in French. So it's 2 lady singers, and to me, them singing in French makes it sound like Stereolab. So, not Stereolab in the musical sense, but Stereolab in the singing sense. So don't get me wrong. Don't go around thinking, oh, I'm going to get a Stereolab, you know, band. Yes, a band that sounds like Stereolab, but it does have reminiscence of Stereolab. And also looks like a Black Album, but it's really a cool hidden blue. So I thought that was pretty cool. Eschaton. Here's a magazine that I've been reading. I got this off of Amazon, I don't know, a few months ago. And it's called, The Shindig Guide to Space Rock, Interstellar Overdrive. And, a lot of these bands you've heard before, but it's just a really pleasant read, It gives you just like little lists, Cosmic Classics, Guru Guru, Evandul, Tangerine Dream, just bands that a lot of us probably already have. And then it goes deeper. It goes, they're just, like a little article on Helton. And it's thick. I don't know how many pages. Let's see. About 170 pages. And then it's got the Space Rock Top 30, the top 30 Space Rock songs, and it was unscientifically calculated. And I'll just go ahead and tell you, which I think is pretty funny, the top Space Rock song of all time, according to Shindig. And then that's the Doctor Who theme by Delia Derbyshire. So that was pretty cool. I think they just had some fun with that. And, Gong's up in there, Hawkwind, Pink Floyd. This is a fun read. And then it's got some of your more current bands, like Carlton Melton. That band F.I. that I talked about not too long ago, I found off of this magazine. I'd never heard of them before. White Hills. So, if you're interested, I found it on Amazon. I think it was like $10. So you might pick yourself up a copy. I'm also starting to read Electric Don Quixote by, it's about Frank Zappa. And I skip around. I don't like the first parts of biographies. They're just kind of boring. They're born, they move, they pick up an instrument. I kind of skip to the part of, when they make their first album. And that's what I did on this. And it's good. So I recommend that one. So let's go back to the albums. The Fourth Way, Werewolf. Now, to me, this is the way a jazz fusion album should sound. It's, I'm sure they made thousands of these in the 70s. And, you only hear about the top ones, Return to Forever, and Miles Davis, and Larry Carrier, Coltrane, Alice Coltrane. But a lot of these more obscure ones, to me, this was kind of obscure because every year I hit a fusion phase. It's usually in the spring. And then I just pick up a bunch of fusion albums and listen to them, and I usually find a lot of people that I hadn't been into before. And this was one of them. And it's fantastic. It does everything it's supposed to do. It's improvisation, great musicianship, changes on a dime. Let's see there was a famous person that came out of this, Michael White, right there on violin, and he made a lot of fusion albums. I don't have any by him, but they're on my list on Discogs. And his first one I heard, can't remember what it was called, but I think he released it in '72, and I've heard that album, and it's on my hit list. Not cheap, not really expensive, but I think the cheapest one was like $35. Here's one. This is by Sura Chris Peters. And he is the, I guess, the lead guitarist. I don't know if he's the lead vocals, but he's like the brainchild of the Samsara blues experiment. And he released his solo album called The Hermit. And there was just 200 copies released, and it sounds really good. It's a tad psychedelic, a tad space rock, tad krautrock, tad new age, tad electronic. I mean, it's just a great album to kick back and listen to. It doesn't go over the top. It's not too noisy. There was no labels on this, so I think the first 100 he put the labels on himself, and then I got a batch. I think this is 103 out of 200, and he signed it, which is pretty cool. You know, I think I'd rather have a signature. And there's nothing on the other side, but apparently he's putting out these albums, and they sound really good. You know, speaking of the 200 run of albums that these artists are putting out today, 200, 300, probably the most of 1,000, a lot of these younger bands, is it puts pressure on fans. I mean, you don't know, like if you've got money, let's say I had money saved up for a Miles Davis album, Pangea, which I need to get, and then all of a sudden I see something like this that looks as cool as heck, 200. Pangea is always going to be there, but this could be out in a day or two, so you jump on it. So it is interesting how it does put a little pressure on the fans to buy quickly and buy them up. Because if not, once they're gone, I mean, they're no longer going to be 20 euros. I think that's what I paid for it. It's going to, they'll be 100 euros. And then I'm not paying that much for an album. Beaver and Krause and A Wild Sanctuary. It's just a good 70s electronic album. The Moog is all over this thing. They were like students of the Moog, the Mini Moog. It just reminds you of the 70s. It's got like little protest chants about war and the orangutan, trying to save the orangutan, and the music is fantastic in itself. If you get a chance, and if you've never heard of these guys by the off chance, listen to them, pick it up. They've got a few albums out, and this one might be my favorite one. I think I have all their albums except for, I think they had a debut album in 1968, and that's a little, those early, real, almost prehistoric electronic albums in the 60s are a little too much for me. It's just too many bleeps and bloops and silence, and then they come back at you like an attack of electronics, and it's just a little jarring. And that album that I'm talking about, I can't remember the name of it, that they put out in 68, it's kind of like that. I mean, it doesn't really flow. It's not musically appealing. Some folks, if you like that type of stuff, well, check it out. Here's the next one, band called Between, Silence Beyond Time, and of course they got the German saying right there, I'm not even going to attempt it. I mean, I really like this album, but it was, when I picked it up, it was labeled krautrock at an auction, an online auction. I got a really good deal about it. If you look online at Discogs, they say it's jazz fusion. I've heard it say it was like new agey. To me, this is, and I don't know if it's a term, but it's almost like post krautrock. It's like that gray area right when new age was starting to happen, and it was still cool. And there's a time, while it was happening, I mean, it's a lot of your Japanese psychedelic bands and German bands were kind of going in that direction after the main krautrock era. And so this is a great album. Would I call it jazz fusion? No, not at all. Would I call it krautrock? Not really. Would I call it new age? It's got some new age leanings. But just call it a nice instrumental psychedelic album. And that's just my opinion. It's kind of hard to really classify, but if there is a term that's called post-krautrock, that's what I would probably call it. It's just that nice area, because new age was kind of good for a while. Ash Ra put out the New Age of Earth, and I think that's kind of when things started tilting to New Age. Not really for him, but that's when the music started happening. At least that's what I heard. That's where the term, one of the times the term first was used, and I wouldn't call that a New Age album. I would just call that one of the best albums of all times. Wouldn't really call it krautrock either. It's just a good guitar album. All right, so here's another one. Just picked this up, and this was another one of those albums that limited pressings. I can't remember, but it was in the hundreds. So you feel that pressure. It's like, I want it. So before they sell out, and these things are $100 a piece, you want to pick it up. It's the Cosmic Dead, Radiohead. Rainbow Head, sorry. Oops. I'll say it one more time. Rainbow Head. It's cool. It's got that Coke bottle colored vinyl. And they're basically an improvisational band. You know, they get together and jam. And it doesn't sound like anything is actually composed before they get together. Which is kind of interesting. I've always thought of this with the Grateful Dead and with other bands, and of course jazz bands. Every time they go on stage and they're improvising for that hour and a half, they have like a brand new album of material. So if they perform 120 shows a year, that's like 120 brand new albums. So if you record from the soundboard and you keep these in your vault, you could just be recording until be releasing albums till you're dead and after you're dead. Because that's basically what it sounded like they just improvise for a good hour and pick out the best parts. It's good. It gets a little noisy. I recommend it. You know, it's not on the spacier side, but it's a good album. The next album is Solar Fire by Manfred Mann's Earth Band. And a few years ago, I was talking to a friend about like space rock and psychedelic, stuff that could take you to another dimension. And he mentioned Manfred Mann, and I laughed at him. I was like, what? And he said, no, really, man, pick up some of their early 70s stuff. And so I started listening to some of their stuff on the internet. And this is one of my favorite ones, Solar Fire. And it's a pleasant album. I mean, it could be called progressive. It's got, I guess my favorite songs on this is Father of Day, Father of Night, and Solar Fire itself, and the last song on the album, Earth the Circle. It just really progressive and spacey, psychedelic. It does take you on a journey. It's not jarring, it's just pleasant music. If you haven't heard it, I'd pick it up and listen to it. I got a couple more of their albums, and I would say they have 3 or 4 really good albums that I like, and that's probably the top. It's a tie between that and The Good Earth, which I will bring out one of these days. Well, that concludes the actual collection tonight. And so I always take a dollar item, something I found in the dollar bin. And I'm starting to wonder now whether I'm just exploring or showing what kind of a good deal you can get in the dollar bin. And maybe both, because in the dollar bin you don't have to spend any money, to only $1 to explore something that looks cool. Or you could buy something that really is cool, maybe that you would spend $5 or $6 for $1. And that's what I did today, or last week. And it's Jean-Luc Ponty, Cosmic Messenger. I've got a couple of his albums, and I mean, I seen it. It was $1, no scratches. Not sure why it was $1. Maybe because of the marks below here. But other than that, it's kind of a no-brainer. Now, he released a lot of albums in the 70s. You know, he was in Frank Zappa's band for a while. But the thing about Jean-Luc is they all start sounding the same after a while. You know, you kind of wonder what album you're on. And this is one of them. It's not bad. It's going in the collection. I'm not saying it's going to get a whole lot of spins, but it will go in the collection. So I think that was a good buy. Anyway, that concludes tonight's Lock Grooves episode. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, comments, or corrections, because I'm not perfect, please leave a comment below. You guys have a nice Saturday night, and have a great time till we see you next time. We'll see ya.